right about now. Hey, buenas
Hi.
tardes a todos. Uh, Thank y'all for joining us this afternoon. We are going to talk about probably one of the most frequently asked questions I get, but I haven't done a video about this. I haven't talked about this, is buying real estate in Mexico. And today I am joined by Anne, who has a gorgeous place in Playa del Carmen. Before we jump into all of that, in case somebody is watching this, in case you're new to the live or you're watching this on the replay, let me introduce myself. I'm Adelia Borachade. Most people out here probably know me as Picky Girl Travels the World. There's Mia. Uh, we have another dog in the house, so she had to come sit by me. And I help Black women master their money so they can live the life of their dreams. And maybe that life includes travel, moving abroad, owning property in another country. If that sounds like the kind of stuff you're into, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. That way you'll be notified the next time we do a live or I upload another video. So I see the folks in the chat. Hey, y'all. I hope y'all caught Rashida's live this morning with Paris cheat code. Very, very entertaining. Very entertaining. Okay, but we're here to talk to Anne and talk to her about buying property in Mexico. So I guess we can start with, why did you buy a place in Mexico?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So I've always loved traveling to Mexico. I think the first time I went to Mexico actually was in 1999 when my kids were a lot younger, and we stayed in Playa del Carmen, and it was just beautiful. We just loved it. We had such a great time. And we actually was considering buying, or, someone had approached us about buying some real estate there. And we loved the place. We decided we were going to do that, my husband and I. And we kind of put our down payment on it, and then we went back home and got cold feet. So essentially, we backed out of that deal, and have regretted it ever since. So when we had the opportunity to come back we've come back several times, but when we came back to Mexico, I think it was just before the pandemic, actually, 2019. We came back and we said, well, why don't we look at it again, see what's going on in Playa del Carmen? And, we do real estate investing anyway, so let's try to see what's there. And so we were introduced. We had a real estate agent that we talked to in Playa del Carmen, great guy, and he showed us a lot of properties, and we ended up buying the property we have now. It is beautiful. It's a brand new development, or a brand new condominium area. And we just love it.
So I guess the first question we should ask is, are you a Mexican citizen?
No, I am not.
Okay.
I am not a Mexican citizen at all.
Because a lot of people wonder about, like, do you have to be a Mexican citizen? Do you have to have Mexican residency in order to buy property? Do you have residency or no?
No, I don't have residency. I just own the property, but that is a very good question. And I was really, in going through this process, introduced to the requirements for an American citizen or any other non-Mexican citizen to buy property in Mexico. So, and I'm a lawyer, but not a legal expert in Mexican law, certainly. So just by my experience is what I can pretty much talk about. But I did retain a Mexican lawyer who helped me through the process. And we do have the paper. So it is possible. It's just a specific way you have to go about it.
Because from everything that I've read, and I have a friend who, I live in Mexico City, and I have a friend, she has bought several pieces of property. One is a lot that she's going to build some kind of house or retreat space. I don't know what she's going to build on it. And then the other, she's got an apartment. So, but she does have permanent residency. And in case anybody is watching this and they're wondering, buying property in Mexico could be a way for you to get residency. I believe the value of the property needs to be something like 170,000 USD, somewhere around there. And y'all know, anytime I give you one of the rules from Mexico's government, you know that's subject to interpretation. But you could apply for residency if you own a property of the appropriate value. That could be one way to get residency.
Mhm.
Okay. So now, is this property that you own in Mexico, is that the only country that y'all own property in outside the US?
My husband's from Nigeria. He owns some property there, of course, but other than that, no, there's no other property that we own outside the US.
Okay. So can you talk to us a little bit about what the process was like? Because is your property in the restricted zone?
I don't understand that it's in a restricted zone, so I'm not sure exactly, what that is, honestly. But the way we processed was basically having a bank trust that actually is, I guess, considered the owner for the purposes of Mexican law. So we are going through an established bank that holds the property in trust for us. It was a very long process, though. I'll tell you that. It's not fast.
Okay, because you're saying that the trust owns it. That makes me think you might be in the restricted zone, because according to, is it the Constitution? I think it's in the Constitution. Foreigners can own property with no restriction as long as they're outside of the restricted zone. And the restricted zone, let me check my notes so I can make sure I get this right, is 50 kilometers off the coast, 100 kilometers away from an international land border. 50 kilometers is about 31 miles. So like, you have visions of owning property on the beach in Mexico, yes, that is possible, but you can't own it directly. You have to kind of go through create a trust or something else that I think they call it I'm about to butcher this despite my Spanish. Fides. Oh my gosh. Fide comiso. I'm killing.
That sounds familiar.
I'm butchering the word, but you saying that y'all's property is held in a trust that way, that makes me think, because it's in Playa del Carmen. It's fairly close
It's
to the
within
beach.
that 31 miles.
Yeah.
It's well within the 31 miles from the beach. Definitely.
Okay, and you said it was not a fast process. Can you talk about that?
No. Well, of course, the builder sold it to us, and it was fast enough to get the contract on it and that sort of thing. But to actually get the legal paperwork done, go through the bank, provide all the information that the bank is looking for, because they do want a lot of information about me, of course, to make sure that I'm a legitimate person buying the property. So even with working through a lawyer, it probably took about 8 months to actually get the property deeded, although the transfer was pretty quick in terms of receiving keys to the property. The builder, as long as the paperwork's in process, they're like, here's the keys, it's yours, as far as we're concerned. But as far as getting the actual deed or the trust documents established, it took about 8 months to do that.
So did the property need to be completely built out before y'all could wrap up that process, since you bought new construction?
Yes, it was built out. It was ready to be inhabited before we took it over. So yeah, we definitely wanted that anyway, because we didn't want to be involved during that construction phase. So once there were keys available, the property was ready to be pretty much occupied. Then we were able to process.
Okay. So, and let me know if I'm digging too deep here. Okay. So please feel free to be like, no, Adelia, I don't want to talk about that. Okay. So y'all went back to Playa, you talked to an agent, you figured out this was the property you wanted to buy, but it was under construction at that time, correct?
Yes, it was under construction.
Okay. And so how do you go from, I see this place that I want to buy, to actually starting the process? Like, did you have to put down a deposit? Did you pay cash? Did you have to arrange for financing? Did you have to, like, what did you have to show them about who you are as a person? Because I think these are all questions that, or things that people don't talk about. People often talk about, like, yeah, we bought 10 acres, but they don't get into the weeds of, well, how does that work?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So fortunately, like I said, we were working through an agent who, similar to real estate agents here, and actually they were with a U.S. based company as far as the agency that they were with. So he, of course, also represented or was helping to sell the property for the builder. And so essentially it was signing the contract was fairly easy, reviewing that, signing the contract, establishing the price, all those things. And yes, there was a deposit required at least to hold the contract. And then about a month later to finalize in terms of confirming that we actually were going to buy the property and starting the process for the transfer. Like I said, it was under construction, so we weren't obligated to pay until the property was actually constructed and ready to inhabit. But yes, we did not go through financing process. Actually, I did this through my what do you call it, individual retirement account, IRA, self-directed. Yeah, so that's how I did it. So it is a property that's held for retirement, generating income for retirement as well. So that's how I was able to not have to go through financing, although it is possible to still do that. And there were options for doing that, but I decided not to go that route.
Okay. I don't know anything. I know you can buy property through a self-directed IRA. I know that much, but I don't know the mechanics of it. Did that complicate? Do you feel like that complicated this process of buying in Mexico at all? Or on the Mexican side, they were like, we don't care, just as long as you got the money?
Yeah, actually, it did complicate it. I will say that, because I was told if I was, well, just to kind of backtrack, in terms of what's required in the U.S. to have a self-directed retirement account, individual retirement account, we have a custodian company in the U.S. that is sort of responsible. We can't just say, I'm putting this in my IRA kind of thing. We have to go through a procedure here in the U.S. So there's a lot of documentation that the company here custodian has to have before they would even approve the purchase in Mexico. And then on the Mexican side, because we were buying not individually, or instead through this IRA, trust situation, we had to do a lot more paperwork to provide evidence of the trust, and there was just more on that end. So I was told by my lawyer it would have been a lot simpler if it was directly purchased as opposed to going through an IRA.
Okay, and I feel bad about butchering the name of the trust. So here it is. I'm not going to try and pronounce it again. But if you're interested in buying property that is within 31 miles of the coast or 62 miles of an international border in Mexico, this is a word that you will need to know, because that is who that entity will own the property. You won't own it directly in your name, but you control that. Okay. So you put down your deposit, construction is completed. Dude, I got too much going on over here. So can we, and guys, if y'all have questions, put them in the chat and we'll try and get that answered. Did you have any exposure to the mortgage situation here in Mexico at all? Or like y'all didn't even entertain
No, not really.
That? Okay.
Yeah, we didn't go through that at all. But we were told there were options there, but I don't have ideas of rates or anything like that.
Yeah, everyone I have spoken to has talked about double-digit interest rates, needing 30-40% down, which is why most of the Americans I speak to who have bought property in Mexico have, if they finance, they opt to get the financing outside of Mexico as opposed to inside, because it just seems Mexico is a difficult place if you want a loan. So, okay, so after the 8-month process of, getting the trust set up, going through the paperwork for your self-directed IRA and all of that, how much of this process did y'all have to be in Mexico for, or did the lawyer take care of most of that?
Actually, there was, the lawyer pretty much took care of that. So I did everything pretty much from the U.S. First I saw the property, of course, in Mexico, then we came back. But after that, it really wasn't required for me to be there, although I did end up going for the closing. I just wanted to be there, but it wasn't required. I could have, I guess, trusted my lawyer to do that as well, but I just wanted to be there for that. So yeah, there was really not any requirement for me to be in Mexico any of that time.
Okay. One of the questions, because I posted on IG that you were going to be here today, and one of the questions I got was about tax implications of, since you own property in Mexico, are there any tax implications?
Do you mean from the Mexican side or
they
from
didn't
the US
specify,
side?
but yes, let's talk about that. Like, what are your tax obligations in Mexico, and then what's your tax obligations for this particular property in the US? Right.
So for the US side, currently there's not a tax implication because it's held in my IRA. So as you know, with IRAs, the income or the value of the property as it's growing certainly isn't taxable. But of course, when I start to take distributions or reach a certain age where I have to pretty much, I probably will have to sell the property at that point, then of course it'll be taxable just like any other property that you would purchase here in the US. On the Mexican side, honestly, I know there are taxes. I don't recall yet how much exactly they are, but they weren't to the point where I was shocked that I had to pay these taxes. So there's real estate tax that had to be paid, and somewhat of a transfer tax as well. But I don't recognize any. And then of course with Airbnb, there are taxes that are done every time you rent out. That's taken care of through Airbnb.
Because that's what I wanted to make sure to talk to you about that, because in the various like foreigner expat Facebook groups I'm in, I've seen a lot of people who have the idea of buying property, or some of them are trying to do like Airbnb arbitrage, where they want to rent a property in Mexico and never mention or take into consideration the tax piece of that. Because if you are generating income based in Mexico, which is what you do because your property is in Mexico, it's rented out in Mexico, therefore you have Mexican income, SAT, the Mexican version of the IRS, says, yes, you owe us some money. How are you handling that? Do you have someone in Mexico that takes care of that for you, or are you doing that?
Well, as far as I haven't at this point, because it's been about a year, not quite a year that I've had it. So I haven't had any tax, and my lawyers will handle that in terms of the tax implications on any income side. However, with Airbnb, that's automatically taken out. And they're, according to their contract, are taking care of making sure it gets to the Mexican government. So I'm pretty confident Airbnb is paying that.
Yeah, no, I think they are, because particularly in Mexico City, prior to, I think 2021, I think that's when the rule changed, Airbnbs were not being taxed the same way hotels were. And so that, of course, gave them a distinct advantage. And after many years of complaining, Mexico City finally got on board with that. And so, yeah, I very much feel like if Airbnb wants to stay in Mexico, they're going to make sure that SAT gets their money.
Right.
We had a question in the chat about, and I know your situation, this might not have been specifically an issue in your situation, but maybe you could speak to, like, if you didn't have to be there to monitor construction, I cannot talk, monitor the construction process, what would be your suggestion? Because that's what Carla's asking. How often did you visit Mexico to monitor the construction process?
Oh, I honestly did not visit at all. And I guess probably the reason is because I kind of, maybe shouldn't have, but I trusted the agent quite a bit, and we'd worked with him before.
But you did say this they worked with a company that was based in the US.
Yes, exactly. And so in addition to that, it was, I mean, of course, did some research into the builder. They did seem to be a reputable builder. And it was our construction is a town home, I guess, what you call it, a town home. So we're in a row, there's about 20 townhomes there. So they were building out that whole section. So I know, and they have sold to people who are resident in Mexico as well. So I just kind of didn't feel like I needed to supervise that. I figured they knew what they were doing, and I certainly wouldn't have even the knowledge to do anything other than to ask the real estate agent, just kind of he said he sent videos, he'd send me pictures, what was going on with that. So I felt pretty comfortable doing it that way.
And I figured as much. Again, like, your experience is a little different. It's not like you just went to Mexico and found this random piece of land and said, I want to own this and I want to build something on it. But I don't want to say warn. I think something to be concerned about in Mexico, because of its tumultuous history and issues with land redistribution and communal land. If you are not buying in a situation like Anne, where it was a development and you had a lawyer that was checking that title was clear, because that's a very important thing. And that's a place a lot of people get burned. I think when you hear most of the horror stories about people having their property seized and that sort of things, it's because they didn't make sure that the title was clear, or somebody got a really good deal on what's called ejido land, which is technically communal land that people will try and sell you. But because you can convert ejido land to land that has a proper title to be sold. But a lot of times people will try and sell it without doing that. And then foreigners, not knowing, buy it. The title is unclear, and they end up losing their investment when and if somebody takes it to court, because the ejido trumps whatever, side deal you made or what have you. So making sure that you have a lawyer or a notario, like a notary. Notaries in Mexico they're not like notaries in the US. They have a whole lot more, do I want to say power? They do like the title search, they prepare the paperwork, they record the new title, they collect the taxes and fees. So you don't have to have a lawyer, although having a lawyer is great, but you definitely don't want to buy property in Mexico without at least a notary. Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
And let me see. I think there's another question here. Is there a minimum or a range of money to have on hand to even begin considering to purchase property? What do you think?
I guess it depends on, what you're buying, as you mentioned. Like, we wanted to buy somewhere that was pretty established location, which this was. We did have a price range in mind. And what we felt comfortable we could afford. So we kind of did a little bit of research beforehand just to see what was available before actually seeing the actual locations and things, and knowing how much we wanted to have. So I guess in the situation, because I knew how much I had in my account or ability to do that for the IRA. That's pretty much what I knew the price range would be. So that was pretty much what I needed, what I felt was comfortable for me. If you're going to finance or you have equity in your home that you might want to use, I mean, I definitely would suggest, checking into what the locations, but also how much, you want to spend in those locations.
Mexico is a country where cash is king. I was just reading an article yesterday about how these different apps that allow you to pay for things have sort of failed in Mexico because the preference is so strong for cash. So I would definitely say as much cash as you can have will make that process so much easier for you. We had a question about title insurance.
Yeah, whether there was title insurance involved.
Yeah,
Yes,
and it would
there was
protect
title
you.
insurance.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So my lawyer did suggest to have that. So I did pay for that as part of the transaction. I would definitely recommend it anywhere, whether in the US or outside the country, if it's available, definitely.
And again, this, I think if you're working with a good lawyer or a good notary, they're going to tell you things like that, like about getting title insurance. But I think sometimes foreigners come to Mexico and they think you can kind of, like in the US, if I wanted to buy your property directly from you, we could do that. I would not suggest it, but we could do that. And I think people try to come to Mexico and do similar deals like that, and that's where they get burned. Nikisha asked about how you purchase your property. Anne's property was purchased cash, but she used it. It was purchased by her self-directed IRA. So she doesn't, it's not, I don't want to say it's not your personal property because it is,
Right.
but it was intended to be a revenue generating asset for your retirement.
Exactly.
And so you purchased it through there. Okay. All right. So what has it been like being a property owner in Mexico through the pandemic and all?
Yeah, that was interesting because, when the like I said, when we first looked at buying it, it was just before the pandemic. And we had started the process, and then the pandemic happened in March 2020 or so. So it was pretty interesting. I mean, again, everything was done remotely, so it wasn't, an issue of travel or having to travel to Mexico in order to get things done. But there was a little bit of, changes in, for example, the exchange rates and things like that made a difference there. So at that point, I mean, if anywhere there's a tip is if you can work in pesos, if it's to your advantage in terms of purchase price, that's going to be a bigger advantage than working in dollars. And so that's number one tip for that. And that kind of helped us during the pandemic. Actually, it was in our favor during the pandemic. It's a little different now, I think, but other than that, I don't know if there's any different. I think in terms of rental, of course, or going through Airbnb to rent out the place, it has been a little more difficult because of the pandemic and the travel restrictions and things like that. But otherwise, just in purchasing itself, I don't think it was an issue.
I was going to ask about have you seen a drop in occupancy and that sort of thing? But you don't really have anything to compare it to. But I will say on the outside, it looks like there are plenty of people in Playa del Carmen all the time. So we have another question. Kathy was wondering, what kind of lawyer did you use? Was this somebody specifically, they're a real estate lawyer?
Yeah, I was referred to, of course, I didn't know anyone there, so I was referred by the agent. And so this person yes, they did other practice areas as well, but they did focus on real estate. And they were actually in Playa del Carmen. Their office was in Playa del Carmen. So I felt comfortable that they knew the area.
Okay. And do you feel it was worth it?
Oh, yes, definitely. And actually, I'm a lawyer, like I said, their fees were totally reasonable. I mean, if you compare to US fees, so definitely it was worthwhile.
Okay, and let's talk about that a little bit because like what kinds of fees are associated with buying the property. So yes, you have to pay the cost of the property, but like, are there closing costs? I have, it's been forever since I bought a house in the US, so I couldn't even tell you what closing costs are, like what percentage and how that would compare to Mexico and that sort of thing. So what kind of fees were you expected, or did you have to pay the fees? Were there things that the seller had to pay? How did that work?
Yeah, most of the fees were paid by me. So the seller did have to pay some transfer tax, I believe, and we had to pay some part of that as well. Of course, the attorney fees, the bank trust, of course, has their own fees because they're not going to do this for free, right? So we had to definitely pay the bank trust fees, and they have ongoing fees as well, just for maintaining that trust. It's not unreasonable, but that's the other part of it. So, and then I think the title insurance would have been the other charges. But I've purchased real estate in the U.S. It definitely isn't much more, if not, it's not anymore. Actually, I think it's less than what we pay here.
Okay, because I just saw something that said maybe around like 5% for closing costs. Um, the fees for the bank trust, though you said there are ongoing fees. So like, is that something annually, like you'll need to pay taxes on the property and you'll also have to pay the fees
Administration, yeah.
of that
Mhm.
trust? And
Right.
you can tell me if this is accurate. From what I read, you have to renew the trust like every 50 years.
Yes, because it's a limited 50 years. So if we have it that long, but yes.
Okay, okay. Several people want to know, have you had a chance to stay in your property?
Yes. Yes, I have. And yeah, that's very important, just to, especially when you purchase new, just to make sure it is what they say it is. But also just to check out things and see how guests would, see things as well. So yeah, definitely want to stay in the property and see how, especially in Mexico, because it is a little different. I mean, it's not the same as here. And so some of the things like just getting food, going to, different things like that. It's just different.
Okay. Do you have any advice for people who are considering doing something similar, buying a property with the purpose of like making it a short-term rental for something like Airbnb, VBRO, or something like that? Any advice or any things they should look out for?
Well, I guess kind of what I've talked about before is, I think that having an agent to work with that's very familiar with the area and vetting them, of course, to be sure, that they have that knowledge, I think is really important. Um, Definitely be involved in the process of get as much support as possible, such as a good lawyer or notario, or whatever is necessary for that. Um, Also with just kind of getting an idea of the location and staying a little bit just to be sure you're comfortable. I mean, don't buy someplace you haven't visited yourself. So make sure that you've done that as well. And I think one of the advantages we have is just buying somewhere that was a little more established, that we knew had a good reputation and was as close to the beach as possible. So that was good.
Yeah, buying from somebody that has an established reputation, I think that's huge, because I see a lot of buildings in Mexico City that are pre-venta. They're doing like pre-sale where you can buy directly from the developer and you pay ultimately the price you paid for the property, the apartment is lower, and you can pay in payment. So basically the idea is sort of like by the time it's finished construction, you've virtually paid for it. The downside, of course, is if the developer goes under or runs out of money, you don't get your money back. So picking somebody that has a proven track record that you can, go and see other properties, that's really, really important. Um, let's see if we had any questions in here. I just had a question on the tip of my tongue, and it's gone. Oh, do you own the land and the townhouse? Or because, like in some countries, like in Thailand, foreigners can't own the land. They own the apartment they live in, but they don't own the land that it's built on.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I probably should look into that more. My understanding was that I owned what it was sitting on, but that's a good question. I will definitely check that out with my attorney to be sure.
Well, I would imagine because you have a townhouse, you probably own the land. But if somebody had an apartment on the 25th floor, they may literally just own the apartment. I don't know. I don't know how these things work.
I could see that.
I'm not in a position to make that kind of commitment anywhere. So, I don't know how that works. What have you, I want to ask, like, what's been the best thing about owning this piece of property? But I don't know if you can answer that because you've only been at it, 2 years almost?
Yeah, just about 2 years or so. I mean, it's been a good experience so far, despite going through the pandemic, and but I guess the best thing is just being able to go to Mexico and say I have this property that I could always have a place to stay, and it actually has been pretty good in just learning more about how the Mexican culture, but in particular, I have a property manager who's there who is really great. She's actually a neighbor, and it's just been really interesting to see how things are done differently from the U.S., but still functional. So I really like that experience.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think some people think about, like, oh, I want to have an Airbnb in another country, but they don't really think about, well, who's going to change the sheets? Who's going to empty the trash?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to make sure that, things are okay between guests? How did you find your property manager?
Well, actually, it's probably my husband who really found her. Like I said, she's a neighbor, and there actually is a condominium association, and she's pretty active in that. And he was more active in it than I was, so it was just sort of meeting through electronically, because we're not there in person. So we just met her through the group chat, and she offered the services, and actually it's been working out very well. We did look at some, I guess, some property management companies. Start out with one, and it just didn't work out well for us. We just did it for a little bit, but it just didn't work out well considering the charges that we had. So we just were hoping to have someone who could pay more attention, because that's the other thing when you're working with a property management company. They have so many properties. Sometimes you don't get the attention, especially when you're doing an Airbnb, that you need. So we were just fortunate to do that, to be able to find someone who was right there on the property.
And is that something I'm trying to understand, or I would imagine somebody's watching this and they're curious about how do they charge you? Do they charge you like a flat fee? Do they have a rate? Is it based on how much time they actually spend actively managing the property?
Mm-hmm. So we'd have a flat fee, a monthly rate, just for general maintenance, and just checking on the place, especially when it's vacant, that sort of thing. And then she charges based on per occupancy, per guest that we have in, not per guest, but per stay, when we have stays there. And so it's pretty much a fixed rate for that, regardless of actually how long it is. So it's actually, but I won't say this is a typical, arrangement. It's just because, we're working that out with a neighbor. So.
And is this the person, if I was staying in your townhouse and something went wrong, is this the person that I would be contacting, or do they not handle that kind of stuff? Like, there's no
They,
hot water.
yeah, no. Fortunately, she does. Yeah, she does handle that. So that's what she's paid for the stay per guest. I mean per stay. So once she's responsible for I guess being the guest services for the guests that are there. So she's our guest services manager. Let's put it that way. But yes, she does take complaints if there are any. She does help with sourcing any vendors or things that we might need if if there's an issue with the home, like not having water, contacting utility companies, that sort of thing.
Okay. Okay. Guys, if y'all have questions about buying property, owning property in Mexico, running an Airbnb in Mexico, this is your chance to ask while we have Anne here, because those are things I don't know a whole lot about. Now, I found Anne's place because I joined a group called the Black Hosting Network on Facebook, and that's how I found her place. And I messed up the link. Hold on. I'm trying to share it in the chat and I messed it up. Okay, here it is. And this is, well, I don't know. And you explain the Black Hosting Network, what this group is about.
Yeah, so I'm relatively new to it, actually. So I think I've joined about a month or two ago, and I found it just kind of searching on Facebook. And the network is basically for those who own Airbnbs or Airbnb, well, not necessarily just Airbnb, but short-term rental businesses, for us to be able to post information about our our properties, and also to be able to support others. So for example, if I'm going to travel to Boston and looking to use Airbnb, go onto the Facebook group and see if there's anyone there who owns an Airbnb, just so we can support each other as well.
Okay, all right. AL had a question, but I need you to clarify what you mean. Can you stay in a self-directed home? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. So if you can, in the chat, give me a little bit more clarity. I think the idea of the Black Hosting Network is really, really, really cool, because I would like, when I travel, I would very much like to put my money in the hands of other people who look like me. So I thought it was a cool group to be a part of, to find, Black owned short-term rentals and that sort of thing. So I definitely encourage any of you who are watching this, if that's something that's important to you, to definitely join this group. And I have seen rentals internationally as well as domestically in the US. And so, like I said, that's how I happened. And Anne's place is so beautiful. I have not had a chance to go to Playa yet, because I'm not really a beach person and I don't like the heat. So, like in a few months when things cool down, I would like to go and check it out. But y'all, her place is so gorgeous. I'm not that anybody asked this, but I'm just curious. Did you decorate it yourself?
Yes, my husband and I decorated ourselves.
Because it's gorgeous.
So we purchased the furniture and everything, and did the decorations.
It is gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. Okay. Again, guys, if you've got a question about the purchasing process, this is your chance to get it answered while we have somebody who's actually done it here. Is there anything that you think you might have done differently if you had to do this all over again?
I'm kind of thinking about it. I probably would have planned a little more in terms of, I knew I was going to, it was an income producing property. So I think I probably would have maybe sourced out more in terms of vendors, people who can, help to manage the property, that sort of thing. It took us a little while to find someone after we had bought the property, and I think I should have probably done that a little bit more beforehand. So I think it would have been easier once we got the property to really get it going for Airbnb for, well, to rent out. Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
You rent it out outside of Airbnb too, don't you? And it
Yes. So yeah, I have it on a couple of other platforms.
okay. And is okay. I always ask this, like when I'm in a small business and they ask me, like, how do I want to pay, cash or credit? Like I'm trying to help out the business owner. So is there one of these places that your property is listed that is more beneficial to you? So like maybe Airbnb, you get the biggest, you have the least amount of fees, or is there some other place that you're like, hey, if y'all want to book my spot, this is really where you should book it?
Yeah, actually, I think Airbnb actually has been better for me than some of the other sites.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I actually think I would prefer people go to Airbnb actually than the other sites.
All right. AL did give us some more details on their question. They're talking about like self-directed. Sometimes in the US, it says the owner can't live in it. So I'm wondering if I can use a self-directed IRA property and spend time in the home.
Yeah, so I think that's correct in terms of, it's not supposed to be for your use. I did mention I stayed because it's part of the business transaction, just so I can see that. So no, I'm not going to stay there like as a vacation unless I've sold, unless I've taken it out of the self-directed at some point, which I'm getting closer towards retirement age. So at some point that might be the case. But yes, as long as if it's being held there, yeah, it's not something where you can say, I'm going to spend a couple months in this property and be part of the self-directed IRA.
Okay, we got another question. Oh, that was not the question I meant to click on. This was the question I meant to click on. Do you use American companies or Mexican for home insurance?
It's Mexican. I use Mexican company.
Yeah. I don't know if an American company will insure it in Mexico. Okay. Okay. Kathy wants to know, it's like a lot of parts going on here. Seems like it could be overwhelming. Did you feel overwhelmed at times when you were doing this?
Not really. I feel like, because I had, these experts on hand with the lawyer and with, the real estate agent and just doing some of my own research as well. No, I don't feel like I was overwhelmed. I think probably, and being a lawyer, I shouldn't feel so, but I felt like sometimes the paperwork was just irritating, but, but other than that, I didn't feel overwhelmed.
We were talking about the self-directed IRA. That did make me think of a question. The value, like the income that you make from the property, is that considered just to be income, or is that considered to be income for the IRA?
It's income for the IRA. So it is reported, because we do have to update that in the states to show what income was received. And so, finally, of course, when you finally are out of that IRA, because at some certain age you do have to take distributions, they're going to need to know, what the gain was and those things to be taxed on. So yeah, it's for the IRA. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, last call for questions. We've been here just about an hour. Let me double check my notes to make sure I didn't forget any of the questions that people had already asked online. We talked about residency. We talked about tax implications. We talked about financing. We talked about the general process. Okay. All right. So, again, last call for questions. Did friends or family think that this was an odd thing for you to do, to go buy property in Mexico?
Fortunately, no. My family or my siblings, they like to travel quite a bit, so they thought it was great. They thought it was great, but no, they didn't think it was odd. I don't know. Some friends are like, really? Did you really do that? So yeah, I guess some people were a little surprised that we had done that or purchased property in Mexico or outside the country altogether, not just Mexico, but the thought of some people of even buying property outside the country is just unbelievable. So yeah, I did get, but nothing serious in terms of feeling like, oh, making me feel as if though it was the worst thing to do. But yeah.
Okay. And how safe would you say that Playa del Carmen is?
I've always felt safe every time I've visited it. I haven't looked at statistics and things like that, but I feel like it's pretty safe. I've never felt in danger or even afraid to go to certain areas, or I'm not at least been told not to go to certain. I have not been told to go to certain areas.
Y'all first went down there, you said like 99, and here it was 2019 that you ended up buying. How much had it changed since you first visited?
Well, it had certainly grown. Definitely, it had grown. It's still. I mean, it's not like Cancun. It's not that way. It's just a different feel. But it has certainly grown. And one of the reasons why we thought we should buy now was because we saw that the property we passed on had really gone up in value. So a little bit of regret there, but yeah, so those kinds of changes, the value of the properties and things like that. But it's still a very beautiful place. Fortunately, I mean, it's not, the beauty of it is still there, and that's the main thing. I think they're very protective of making sure that it's a very beautiful place for people to visit.
That is so awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for giving me a little bit of your Sunday afternoon and sharing your experiences with the people here. What did I want to say? In the description, I will put a link to Anne's listing on Airbnb in case any of y'all find yourselves in Playa and you want to stay at a place that is absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
That'll be there. There will also be a link to, I'm trying to remember what else I wanted to put in there. If you want more videos of other people living in Mexico, doing their thing here, I'll put that link there as well. Thank y'all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.